Thanks for joining us at the Business Growth Cafe, where each week we select from a menu of topics for a focused discussion with an industry expert to provide insights that can impact your business's growth. With your host, Angelo Ponzi.
Hi, I'm Angelo Ponzi, your host here at the Business Growth Cafe, and thank you for joining me. Have you ever decided to start a business? Maybe you've started a business. Maybe you're in your 1, 2, 3, maybe your first 5 years of growing your business. You know what it's like going down that road to growth. Twists and turns, ups and downs, a lot of obstacles that you may have not planned on because you had this great idea, you loved your product, you loved your service, and you ran out there, put a shingle on the door, and started a business. Now, hopefully, you did a little more due diligence than that, but sometimes that's not the case. As a matter of fact, my first business at age 23, my partners were about 20 years older than me. I listened to them. I believed everything they said. And at the end of the day, in and out in 8 months. Now, I also do a lot of mentoring at some of the universities, and I'm talking to people that have these great ideas and they're thinking about starting a business. Well, if you're that person or you were that person and started a business, you're going to enjoy today's show with Jason Locklin. He is the founder and the CEO of CloudCompli. He actually had the idea for a business while he was in business school. Now, Jason's had those ups and downs, twists and turns, and the road to growth wasn't necessarily straight. Get some slick times. He's skidding it around, ups and downs, left and right. But at the end of the day, 10 years later, he has a successful business. So we're going to dig into the insights of how did he get the idea? How did he start it? How did he grow it? What were his challenges that he had in growing those, and what the milestones in order to get to where he is today? So this is going to be an interesting conversation. I know you'll benefit from it. I hope you stay tuned. Jason, welcome to the Business Growth Cafe.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know we've been talking about this for a little bit, and I'm glad we can get you on the show. I think you're going to have some great insights for my listeners. But before we get going, why don't you tell them about who you are and about your companies?
Sure, no problem. Jason Locklin. I am the CEO and founder of CloudCompli and InCompli. We are a environmental firm, consulting firm, and software as well. We founded the company in 2010, and recently have worked with Angelo, and that's who we are.
Okay, I'm going to dig into a little bit more on that. So you've got two companies. So it's interesting. So InCompli, which is more of your consulting and compliance company, started in 2010. So the chicken or the egg, which one came first?
Yeah, so 2010, I was in school, and I had this itch to start another business, meaning that we had one that went under with the whole crash of '08, and so I still had a book of business in the sector, and so after the business went under, I said, I got to go back to school and figure out how to do this right. Definitely wanted to found a company, wanted to be an entrepreneur, had that spirit for a long time, since my early 20s. And long story short, I was in school, and I had a client call me and said, "Hey, we need a little work done." I said, "Okay, no problem." And a week later, I was asking my wife if I could start a new company. Needless to say, that conversation was a little interesting, but ultimately I got her support, and we started InCompli, which is a consulting company. We work with in the building industry, and we help them satisfy compliance requirements for EPA standards. And shortly thereafter, I had always been a techie and kind of really wanted to harness the power of cloud technology. So within about 6 months, we started a prototype for a piece of software to actually help a lot of the workflows. We had been doing a lot of these inspections and reports manually, paper, pencil, Excel, and like most people, thought there had to be a better way to do this. And so we ultimately started a prototype to build a piece of cloud-based technology to support a lot of the workflows that we provide for our customers. And so, several years later, we basically branched out. That software company as its own entity, and now we run those two businesses.
Now, you mentioned the business before that, and so was that also in the same space?
It was in the same space. Yes, it was. And it was very correlated to the housing market. And as we all know, in 2007, 8, 9, that basically, you know, got obliterated. So
As it crashed and burned.
to that. I mean, yeah, we actually, on a positive side, we landed a really large project and we're unable to get funding to support the project because the banks had all locked down. We had a good business plan, we had good financials, and so that was kind of the start of our demise, was not being able to get supported on the funding side for a very large project that we landed. So it was kind of a very positive thing at first, and then ultimately ended up being our demise. But I think that's the risk you take as an entrepreneur, is that there's that risk that something could happen, and it's not it's not like you're working for a company, you can just go get a new job. It's interesting. So, but that's the risk you take. And again, I think it was obviously some dark days for me for a while there as the business went under, but then, really kind of twisted it around and said, hey, I need to, let's go back to school, finish my degree. I had dropped out of school in order to start the business. And I thought, well, I should probably finish this and figure out how to do everything right. And, it was a great experience starting that business as I was going to school and finishing my business degree, because I was able to take a lot of those, theories and practices that I was learning in the classroom right back to the business the next day. It was a kind of a night and weekend program, so I was able to still continue to run the business and build the business up at the same time. So it was a really good experience overall as I look back on it now.
Well, we learn from failure, and I don't know about you. So my first business at an early age, at 23, in and out of the market. It took off like gangbusters and failed miserably 8 months later. And it was an incredible experience and an education that I certainly didn't have in school, right? Some of that practical knowledge. And I got some partners, and the partners were like 20, 25 years older than me. And they convinced me they knew the market and all they needed was my money. And at the end of the day, the business failed. They got my money. They didn't steal it, but we lost it in the business. But the education that came from that practical education of what it really took to do sales and to do marketing and to knock on doors, collect money, all those different things that they didn't necessarily teach, that practical experience of knocking on somebody's door and asking to get paid. So in 2008, 2009, those were some interesting times for myself as well, as the company I was working for decided to merge us into the corporate headquarters and suggested we move. And my answer was, no way, I've got little kids. And the next several years was very interesting, trying to start. Nobody could predict, right? We all, as marketers and business people, we look at not only internally, but externally that can influence our business. And nobody could have predicted, at least I couldn't, what was going to happen in those several years. So
it's the ripple effects from that. We saw it in COVID, where you had this extraordinary event that occurs that's unexpected, unplanned, and it hammered some industries, and it allowed some industries to thrive. And who would have ever been able to predict something like that? I'm sure big business with all their resources, and maybe they have some contingency plan down the road that says, what happens if there's a global pandemic, but ultimately, the small business owners, small and medium businesses don't necessarily have the resources to plan that far ahead. So it's, like Russian roulette. It's like, with us, when COVID came up, it was like, we had no idea. We were obviously very, very nervous and scared. And ultimately the construction industry was minorly affected in terms of logistics, but ultimately it wasn't too affected, so we're blessed for that. But you never know. And it's I'd say, going back to your comment about the education, I don't necessarily think you have to fail in order to sort of succeed ultimately down the road. I think it's just that experience of like you said, running a business for the first time, and there's a lot of things. You have to do everything at first, and you have to be able to sell, you have to be able to get on the phone and convince a customer to do business with you that first time. And then you have to service that customer and provide a good service. And there's a lot that goes into those two steps there.
Yeah.
And as you scale, obviously, you have to start to bring in staff and sort of, again, those two processes have to be fulfilled. But I don't think it's necessarily, you have to fail, but I think it did help, certainly. I do think, though, there's some areas where I'm a little jaded from that, where I'm, a little nervous for the future. And sometimes you kind of get, those thoughts never leave you, of that feeling when, your business is going under and you're losing money and whatnot. Like, those are scars that are there for life. So I could do without those.
Yeah, well, I can empathize with that. But I think too, though, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, but it makes you think a little harder because you have that, right? We carry these scars that says, okay, I know what can happen when things go sideways. So how do I think about that a little bit differently? And that actually leads me to one of my questions, because you're running currently two businesses at the same time. Mm-hmm. So how much time do you spend on your business thinking about the strategies and the growth versus the day-to-day in it, do you find?
That's a great question. I would say, I'd say a large percentage of my time is on the business in terms of strategy. Now, that hasn't been the case. That takes a while to get to that point. I think that's a metamorphosis as an entrepreneur, is learning to ultimately, trust in your staff and, hire people that match your values and share the values of the company. And again, building that culture that ultimately satisfies sort of the business goals. But I would say that I have a fantastic staff that really handles a lot of the, most of the functional aspects of the business. And now my time is mostly spent, just working on, supporting the staff. We just started a leadership training program for all of our managers. So we have quarterly leadership program meetings where we bring the staff and all the managers in, and we go over different topics, and then we incorporate that into our day-to-day. So my time is really spent a lot more on strategic and working on the business, like you said. Not too much. I mean, when there's problems that come up, the staff obviously would they'll bring me in for my opinion and to help them make a decision on things. But ultimately, I support what they're doing and when they make those decisions. So I'd say probably 95% of my time is spent on the business versus working in it functionally.
Well, that's great. I mean, it sounds like you're building a good infrastructure with your people, laying the foundation for them to make those decisions that they need to make to keep the business going forward, so you can think about the future.
I think that's definitely an evolution. At least for me, it took a long time to get to that point where you can build that trust in your staff. I was lucky enough to have a couple core foundational employees that have been with me since the beginning. And, that's an interesting journey as well, as the business grows, those people started off doing things a lot differently than what they're doing now. And so we all have to kind of grow together, right? Because now we have, 20, 26, 27 employees versus 2. And so there's a lot, those myself and those core employees that started with me in the beginning, we've grown together into now leadership roles, and now we are, ultimately managing others and helping them succeed and grow and whatnot. So it's that's an interesting journey as well, is going from doing everything to doing nothing.
Yeah. Well, I won't say you're doing nothing, right?
From a functional standpoint.
The functional stuff. So let's talk a little bit about kind of as an entrepreneur and a business owner and growing a business. I mean, finding the right employees is always a challenge, right? Not only from can they do the position, but it's about culture as well, and making sure that you could have somebody who's great at what they do and the right person, and culturally they don't fit at all, which ends up being disruptive and those kinds of things. So how do you go about determining the right employees for your business?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually that happens to be the topic for our leadership discussions this year, is organizational culture. I think that's everything. I mean, that's an evolution as a business owner and as an entrepreneur leader, is that culture is everything. Prior to that, it was like I think in the very beginning, it was like, I just want to find someone that can do this job, and hopefully I can, get a good deal on their salary. And 10 years later, now today, it's a whole different animal, or a whole different perspective when you're bringing someone on. It's really mainly about cultural fit. We have our corporate values that are with us and have been with us for 10 years. And so it's really about, bringing people on that match those values. I mean, we happen to be extra mile service. So, customer service is really important for us. Having that, we need to find employees that have that heart for customer service, innovation. We have a work-life balance, and then integrity. So those are our 4 core values. And so just finding, team members that match that. And that's difficult, because the hiring climate right now is obviously challenging with COVID and the great, I guess they call it the great resignation, I think is what it is. And so it's challenging to find good people. And so it's even harder, now more than ever. So, but yeah, I think that's really kind of the goal, is to find, staff that really just match up with those values. And, you may be a little off with one of them, but ultimately, it's still a good fit. So, and then you have a focal point, right? If someone maybe hasn't had a lot of customer service experience, you can certainly train for that. But really it's about, hiring for attitude and then training for aptitude. So it's more, I think the attitude is the key component when hiring new staff.
What do you think's been the biggest challenge in growing your business?
Oh, it's a great question. I think that those challenges have, again, sort of changed over the years. In the beginning, it was got to get a customer, and once that was sort of established, then it was okay. Now we need to service, at scale these customers. Okay, now we have double the customers. Now how do we? Again, I think it's always this balance of sort of quality versus quantity. I'm always balancing how much growth versus are we able to service, that amount of customers. And so I think that's really, I'd say the biggest challenge is matching up the quality with the sort of the growth that comes in. So, there's been times where we've grown too fast and we weren't able to service our customers at the level that we expect. And then there's times where maybe we focus a little too heavily on quality control and maybe let growth sort of subside a little bit. And then, then we got to kind of, push on the gas pedal in terms of trying to get new customers in. So I think for me, it's that balance of, and obviously the sweet spot would be being able to sort of, concurrently grow and scale your customer service at the same time. But I think that's probably the biggest challenge over the years, has been matching those two.
Okay. You mentioned something that, I talk to my guests a lot about, and that's the elusive work-life balance. And that's one of your core competencies, or your core missions here. How do you and you directing your staff, how do you get there? And, and have you got there?
Yeah, I would say yes. I think that that's one area where I think our staff has been really, sort of successful in implementing at least the sort of the vision for that. I think just it's a core belief of mine that there needs to be a balance. I have worked the 80-hour weeks or whatnot. I don't know if actually 80 hours is kind of extreme. I don't know if anybody actually works 80 hours, but I've put in those, those nights and weekends, and I strongly believe that a balance is necessary. We're sort of lucky in our industry where we're mainly in the construction industry, where it's kind of a 9 to 5, typically not working on the weekends, so there's not really a huge pull for us in terms of customers calling us on the weekend. On the software side, obviously, that the software industry is, sort of known for sometimes toxic environments where people are working way too much hours. But again, I think it's just a core belief of mine that there needs to be a balance. And so we put that to practice. there's a few things that we do in order to satisfy that, or at least to sort of promote that. One of the things is we have every employee is given a vacation bonus every year, and they're encouraged to take vacation, and we actually pay them to do that. And that's not an original idea. It was lifted off of the folks over at Basecamp. They have a great book called Rework, I think is the book. And they're huge on work-life balance. I've learned some of the practices from them, but yeah. So we encourage time off. In our leadership meetings, we often will bring up topics and talk about things like sleep and exercise and health and things like that. We try not to schedule anything on the nights and the weekends. If there's a question I have, I'll usually throw it out on Slack and I'll say, please don't answer until Monday morning at 8 a.m. So I certainly don't have that expectation that my employees work outside of business hours from my perspective. And I hope that seems to trickle down and, sort of is ingrained in our culture. But that's definitely something that's important. I think it's paid off because, our employees come in fresh on Monday. They're able to take vacations. There's no stress there. We help them with that so that when they do go on vacation, the money side of things is taken care of a little bit. So we really try to sort of internalize that. And I think it's been pretty successful.
Well, that goes back to what you just mentioned, and of course we've been discussing is culture. I mean, that's top down. Culture doesn't start from the bottom up, right? So you're setting a good tone for that. It's interesting. I worked for a company one time where, you could cash in your vacation, and then I've worked for companies that said use it or lose it. We are encouraging you to go do something and go rest, and I think that's smart. Especially in your early years, it's you want the cash. I can't go anywhere anyway, so I'll get the cash. But I'm a big proponent of vacations and people resting. And I commend you actually in not looking for responses kind of after hours. I mean, today's technology, right? We're walking around with computers in our pockets, and I'm going to guess you're like me that you tend to look at your phone and check your emails, and it's too easy to respond at night, in the morning, weekends. As I was sitting here yesterday, working, unfortunately, on a Sunday, and I got a ping from somebody that said, "I assumed you were working today," and I thought, God, how sad is that? That I'm known for sitting, around on either the morning or the afternoon at each day on the weekend. So I personally, I'm gonna follow your rules, and I'm gonna start changing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the type of behavior from management, in past where it's like use it or lose it. You don't need vacation. I expect, it's just so toxic. I think when I look at the PTO balances sometimes, and I'll start harassing people to take time off. Look, if you can't afford it, that's one thing, but there's always staycations, and it's really about having that balance of time away from work versus time working on stuff. We just had a big project with the software that we had a successful deadline we hit with the team, and the lead on that took a week and a half after that to get a break, because again, it was a bit of a grind, but I think that's, and we were all excited for him to get a break. So I think it's just part of our culture. I think that I would say that it's important to me, but it's important to everybody in the company. So it sort of resonates and permeates and stays with us. So it's I also don't like to call our teammates family. Like, you have your family, and your family is the most important thing to you. We're your work associates, and we love you, but we're not your family. And
yeah,
it kind of that sort of perpetuates that culture. Like, you should be here instead of home, and we're your family, and let's have we'll have events and we'll drink beer after work. It's like, no, go home, please, go to your family. And then there's folks that, obviously there's the outliers, that folks that, want to hang out, which is fine. We encourage that as well. But for the most part, we try to keep it strictly during business hours.
Okay. There's obviously, we got a lot of stuff going on in the world, a lot of domestic policies, and one of them is the infrastructure plan. Do you see that is going to help your industry and create opportunities for you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Part of our, our customer base is made up of we have municipalities, we have large builders, we have industrial, operators that are, they have big industrial plants. And so the portion of the infrastructure is probably going to touch the public works side of things. So a lot of public works projects, you're thinking like DOT projects. So that's all kind of our sweet spot for customer bases. So certainly it will help over the next several years. I think another thing that's exciting coming up is the Olympics 2028, I believe, LA. So LA is expected to obviously prepare for that with a lot of infrastructure projects, and so we're hoping to, a lot of our customers will be involved in those, and so we'll be involved in that as well. So yeah, the infrastructure bill that passed obviously it will be a shot in the arm for us and for our customers. And again, it's I think it's important. I would love to see our infrastructure take a leap. I think we're behind the other world. If you've done any traveling outside of the country, you know that our country is behind in terms of infrastructure. So it'd be nice to see that finally come to fruition.
One of the things you just mentioned, and I want to go back to the two companies, CloudCompli and CloudCompli. So, and again, as you mentioned earlier on, I have done some work with you, and I appreciate that opportunity. It was a fun project. But CloudCompli is really a national brand, but CloudCompli is more California, right? Because it's physical consulting and things like that.
Yes.
Is there plans to expand that across the country?
Yeah. We have we do a little bit of work in a few other states: Nevada, Arizona, Oregon, Washington. But for the main part, our consulting practices is mainly California, and for reasons like you said, we have a geographical footprint, and it's physical people out on the job. We mainly do inspection type services, water testing, inspection, report writing. But yeah, and we part of our we want to become a national brand, and so that's our sort of our mission for CloudCompli. And so we are looking at opportunities in other states, potentially M&A stuff, but absolutely part of our plan is to grow that side of the business outside of California.
Okay. And so in doing those kinds of plans, do you look at obviously where larger metros are and kind of growth from an infrastructure standpoint?
Yeah, we've done some market research in the past where we're looking at several different factors that would benefit a growth plan for us. One of them is obviously building footprint. So how many construction starts are you seeing in a particular state? I think Texas has been the leader of that for several years. But then also for us, it's a matter of we're in compliance services, so it's the magnitude of the regulatory frameworks in those states. And so a state like Texas, they may not have as much regulatory requirements as a state like California. So you got to balance that and kind of look at the two. California is a great market for what we do. A lot of building, big footprint, a lot of open land still, and our regulatory frameworks are fairly stringent here. So it is a good market for compliance. So that's kind of the lens we look at. You look at some of the states like Arizona, Nevada, where you do have pretty lax regulations, I would say in general. Not necessarily lax, but maybe not quite as strict as California. But then maybe not as much. As much open space but those states are growing a lot. And so then you go up to like Oregon, where you have pretty stringent requirements, but they have a lot of restrictions on open space and building. And so you kind of balance those things. We look at market, and we also look at regulatory framework. Obviously we look at competition as well, but that's pretty standard across the states. So those are the two things we look at.
Okay. If you were doing it all over again today, what would you do different?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. I think that's a great question. I think I would have focused, going back to that culture, question. It's taken me quite a bit of time to sort of realize that that's the most important thing, is your people and getting the right team and sort of empowering them. I wish I would have sort of made that personal, sort of evolution a little earlier in my career and in this business. Obviously, I don't like to look back and talk about what ifs, but if I had a chance to sort of do it again, I think certainly would really focus on sort of the people aspect, a lot more than I did in the early days. In the early days, I hate to say it, but I almost thought of it as kind of just like an expense. Like it was like I got to get this person as cheap as I can and negotiate with them and try to get as best a salary as I could. And it's now it's like that's down the list. It's more about cultural fit. So I think I wish I would have sort of come to that realization a lot earlier in my career. I think we could have, you get the right people in the right positions and you can really accelerate the business. And it's astounding at how much of an impact good employees can make on your business. So I think just understanding that earlier would have been a big win for me if I could have done that.
Okay. So the concept of the cafe here is about business advice and learning from, people like you that have grown businesses and had some ups and downs. So if you had, I'll say 3 or 5 kind of key lessons that you'd like to tell my listeners as a starting and growing a business, what they should think about.
Oh, that's another good question. I think that as an entrepreneur, you really, like you said, you have to do everything. Now you could if you're a CFO type, let's say you're a financial person, you could certainly raise a bunch of money and hire a staff, and those folks can do all those different functional aspects. In terms of I think my advice would be framed in the sense of kind of my path, where it was a small business where I did everything at first and then sort of slowly work my way out of that. So I would say certainly you have to be comfortable with selling, and that's the first thing that I ever did with my business was I sold a job. I got a deal, and then obviously from there you have to learn how to service that deal. But I think just taking some sales training in between, the 2 businesses, I worked a sales job, and I was literally on the floor making hundreds of calls a day, and I built up some chops in that regard, and so I was comfortable doing that. I think that's, if you're gonna kind of do that, start it on your own. I think, obviously learning sales is a big thing, and then marketing goes with that. I think that's something that people overlook a lot in the early days is really being studious with your marketing efforts and capabilities and putting resources into that. And so the second thing I think would be to really invest in marketing, whether that's social or all the channels that are relatable to your business. Third, I think, again, just good people, figure out what your core values are, figure out what's important to you. If you want to run your business with integrity and great customer service and work-life balance, then write that down and hire to that. So I think the cultural aspect would be important, but it has to fit. There has to be alignment. You can get a great person that does, but they may not necessarily align with your values. They may be, if you're sort of maybe a service type business where it's more of a family feel, you may not really fit well with a high performance, salesperson that is always driving, and that just might not be a good cultural fit, even though that employee may be, excellent at what they do. So I think, the cultural, make sure that you figure out what your core values are and then sort of hire to that. And then I think lastly, maybe my fourth piece would be, make sure that you're funded properly. I mean, that's not always a luxury you can have, but I mean, make sure that, you're set up to, cash flow is everything with a small business. So whether it's cash in the bank or bank financing or investing, make sure that you have proper capital, hire a financial CPA, someone that can help you with the cash flow aspect of it, because that's really, cash is king. They say that for a reason. That's everything. And so making sure that your business is funded properly. There's nothing that's more detrimental than that stress of worrying about, whether the bills are going to be paid or not. So if you can eliminate that and have a good sort of financial position, again, it's not always a luxury that you can have. I mean, I certainly didn't have that in the beginning until the business was established and we had a few years under our belt. Banks wouldn't work with us, but ultimately, that's a really important thing, because that removal, again, we talk about balance, that removal of that stress of worrying about the cash flow, will really allow you to accelerate in other areas, because as we know, stress is very taxing on the body, on the mental aspect. And so I would say make sure your cash flow is in order. That would be a really important one.
Okay. One of the things I was taught earlier on in sales is that I can't take it personally, right? And as soon as you do, then you get that defeatist attitude. And people you're calling, they don't know you. It can't be personal, right? It's just they're not interested, or whatever, the timing's wrong, et cetera, et cetera. So that's always something I like to say. But I wanted to ask, when you're doing your planning, you're doing business planning, are you on an annual basis, a quarterly basis? What's your cadence for planning? Because I hear a lot of times, we're going to have our annual planning meeting, and my thought is, well, if you're only doing it once a year, then you're going to have some problems, right? So what's your cadence for planning?
Yeah, that's a good question. So so obviously we have to prepare an annual plan where we'll establish our goals and the business goals. The bank wants to see that, obviously. So our cadence, typically we'll start to look at that around the start of I'd say end of Q3, start of Q4, so September, October-ish. That's when we're starting to build out our plan, because we have enough data from the current year. We're 9 months into the current year to know if we're going to hit plan for the current year, and so we're able to sort of project forward and look at the next year. I haven't always been the best disciplined about getting the plan out by the first, so there may be a couple of years where I've pushed out plan in February or January, but like the last couple of years we've been really good about it. I work, our CFO, Mike Sisk, is fantastic. So we start to dig into that in September, October. I really involve the team a lot more now. So we'll have, I think we typically will have a strategic meeting around the October timeframe, and I'll sort of bounce the budget off of them and get their feedback. Decision making for me, I typically will. I move pretty slow with decision making. I know some people, they say, oh, you got to be, make decisions quickly and stick with them, and that's the way to be. I disagree. I like to kind of roll into my decisions and really take as much input as I can from my surroundings, my staff, my advisors, and kind of think on it for a couple of weeks and just really kind of look at the data, and also look at those gut feelings, those sort of internal, which are just as powerful sometimes as data. And so I work on plan for about 2 months, and then we finally lay it out, and that's sort of what it is. So we try to get that published around December 1, so it's ready for the banks, and it's it's there. Obviously we can distill that down to the staff and talk about different goals and such. But on top of that, obviously we're doing we do strategic planning every quarter with our staff with these leadership meetings. So there's that as well. And then we'll typically do like a strategic meeting once. We'll do it around that sort of fall time period, where we're looking at what are the strategic goals of the business, and then I can also use that to tie into the financial plan. So I'd say we have typically it's sort of a couple month process, and we do an annual plan from that. But there is a lot more sort of quarterly type time frames when we look at plan, but in terms of like publishing a singular plan,
sure,
it's once a year.
Okay, well, fantastic. Jason, this has been great. A lot of great insights, and certainly first of all, congratulations at 10 plus years and growing your businesses, and again, I can be empathetic. Back in 2008 and 9 with you on business at that point in time in life. So why don't you take a minute and tell the audience how they can connect with you if they want to have a chat. I want to learn more about your, CloudCompli or InCompli, and I'll let you take it.
Yeah, sure. My email, best way to reach me is email jason@cloudcompli. That's CloudCompli.com. You can take a look at our website, and then InCompli is the same spelling, INCOMPLI.com. But again, if you'd like to reach me, the email is always best, jason@cloudcompli.com. Would love to chat. Certainly learn about your business if you want to chat about that. But I'm always open for questions and connecting with new people. So I think I'm on LinkedIn too. So reach out to me there. Twitter, Jason Locklin. I don't do too much on Twitter, but
we got to have the channels. We don't necessarily do anything with them, but we got to have them, right? Well, Jason, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and I know my listeners will find your insights invaluable.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. Jason, thank you again for stopping by the Business Growth Cafe today. What a great conversation and a journey. I mean, we have worked together for, 6-7 months now, and I didn't really understand a lot of that history. So it was fascinating to listen to it and to kind of dig into it. And, a lot of great lessons for my listeners, and I know they're going to benefit from that. And I really appreciate it. If this is your first time, I encourage you to subscribe to the show so you don't miss a single episode, as we do them on basically a weekly basis. And if this is your first time or you're a loyal listener, I encourage you to go to your favorite podcast platform, give us a rating, give us a comment, and tell your friends about it. As we look to 2022, we are in our 4th year, so there's a lot of great shows you can go back to and listen to. And as I always say at the end, join me here next week at the Business Growth Cafe.
A chief marketing officer has both the power and the responsibility to drive long-term strategic growth that can ultimately lead to organizational prosperity. And that growth starts with a vision. What is your firm's definition of success? Growth? How will you strategically work towards expansion, for example? Equally important, what is your customer's perception of your firm? And how well do you meet a need or deliver value? When you begin to align your vision with that of your customer, you build a stronger, lasting relationship with them. You see the whole picture, realizing the lifetime value of that customer, as well as the lifetime value you provide. A CMO must look at success with a strategic mindset, looking beyond the transactional. The CMO must understand the customer journey, utilizing the competitive intelligence, embracing and leveraging your unique market insights. If your business is ready for growth and you need a CMO, but you're not quite ready for a full-time person yet, I'd welcome the opportunity to explore the benefits of using a fractional CMO.
Visit craftmarketingandbranding.com.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion at the Business Growth Cafe with your host, Angelo Ponzi. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast and visit our website at www.businessgrowthcafe.com. Read Angelo Ponzi's blogs at www.theponzigroup.com.